Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and this is episode 77 on Views from Downstream. And for the past couple months, I've been focused on talking about the worship service and pointing out that the worship service has, in a sense, become the sole tool of discipleship in the local church. And it's not very effective doing that, and it's almost impossible, no matter how you do it, to meet the discipleship needs of people in the congregation with just a worship service. There needs to be a lot more one-on-one time, small groups. Needs to be a lot more intentional about growing people in their walks with the Lord. And I just want to summarize what I've been talking about over the last couple months. And one of the things I pointed out that over the last 10, 15 years, maybe longer, but it really stands out to me in that time frame, is that the worship service has basically become two-dimensional. It is music, which we call worship, and I pointed out not long ago that worship is not solely music. And so we've kind of think that that's the time of the week that we worship, that we're worshiping every day of the week, every hour of the day, really, by how we glorify God through our thoughts and through our actions. And the other part is the sermon. And I've pointed out, not only in the last couple of months, but I've talked about this before, that the sermon is basically a 20 to 30 minute monologue. Pastor talking to the people of the congregation. And it's very passive. That's what the church has become. The worship service has become very passive. It has become more spectator oriented than it is really engagement. And that's the thing that is really missing in our worship service is engagement between the Lord and the people, and through the leaders, whether they be the worship leaders, the music worship leaders, or the pastor. There's just so little engagement, and there's rarely any engagement with each other. And that really is a weakness in building community and building a sense that we worship God as one, not as individuals, but as one. We are the body of Christ. We're not the bodies of Christ. We're the body of Christ. We make that up, all of us together. And so we really need to change the way in which we, I think, approach the worship service, so we're not reinforcing wrong concepts of what it means to be in the body of Christ. And I want to just talk about how we can summarize, how we can make this happen. I've talked about this, but I just want to summarize what I talked about. And overall, like I said, we need more engagement. And one of the ways of doing that is cutting the time devoted to the music, because it takes so much time of the service. It can take 1/3 to sometimes 1/2 of the worship service. And again, particularly with men, it's very passive, because a lot of the songs are written for to be performed, professionally sung. And so it's hard to sing some of these songs that are used today in our worship services. They're just not singable with just an average person who likes to sing. And so it becomes a passive thing. People are standing, but they're listening. They're not actually singing. They're not actually participating. And so we need more engagement in that, probably changing some of the songs that to where they're songs that really were written to be sung by everyday people, not professionals, and sung not to be performed, but to really draw people into a worshipful attitude and into that space where we're really feeling like we're drawing near to God. And then the other thing is a sermon is a monologue. There's not any engagement. So basically, it's like we're listening to a lecture every Sunday for 20, 30, 40 minutes. Because I say lecture because it's a one-way discussion. It's a monologue. And so again, it's not engaging the congregation, except if some people are taking notes, which I know they do. My wife takes notes and does a good job of it, but most people don't take notes. And so they're just sitting there listening. And the reality is that within hours, and particularly within days, they've forgotten most of what was preached on that Sunday. And so we're not really getting the congregation involved in the message. And so what I emphasize is that we need probably to cut the sermon to 15 minutes or so and then open it up. I mentioned a number of different ways you could do that, but you could take questions from the congregation. You could, the pastor could ask questions of the congregation, or you could get into small groups and have some prepared questions to talk about what has just been preached. But some way to get people more engaged rather than just in this mode of listening. Because the reality is our society has changed a lot and our attention spans have changed dramatically. Even for adults, we focus a lot on kids and their attention spans, but attention spans of adults also have changed. And I think there's just a real difficulty to sit and listen for 30 or 40 minutes and really take in everything that's being said and taking it out and applying it. And so I think we need to engage people more, give them opportunities to discuss the sermon. I think it will drive home the points much better because people are actually discussing it out loud. They're discussing it with others, and that cannot but help the memory and get people to thinking more about it. The other thing is that because we become a two-dimensional church, we're leaving out some real vital parts of being the body of Christ. And one is we rarely hear what God is doing in people's lives. And in general, I call that a testimony. Most people, when they hear testimony, they think, oh, how did I come to the Lord? And that can be a testimony. But our testimony doesn't begin and end when we come to know Jesus. We have a whole lifetime of walking with him, and hopefully we have a lot of testimonies to share about our growth and what we're experiencing, what we're learning about God. But we give congregation no opportunities really to share those things because they're time consuming. And we've decided, again, this is what we're going to focus on, music, and we're going to focus on the sermon. And so we cut out what we don't think is absolutely necessary. It's just gotten crowded out. But we need to open that up because it's good to hear what God is doing in people's lives. It can be so encouraging and reaffirm the justification of being a Christian. That it's not just like, oh, I'm a Christian and not really much is going on, but I feel like I'll go to heaven, but not much else is going on. But we can hear and experience what actual people are doing and experiencing with the Lord. And so that's really important. The other aspect that we have basically cut out is communal prayer. We have not allowed people to pray with each other and pray aloud. We have confined it to the pastor or another church leader, somebody up front on the stage. They're the ones that lead the prayers. And it's rare that a congregation will allow people to pray from the seat or the pew. And I know, and I said this before, I know that some people are just like, oh, they're gonna drag it out. They're gonna say things that we aren't too sure of. And so we've just kind of pulled back, but we've overreacted. I understand both the time constraints. I understand about not letting people just go off on tangents and talk for or pray for like 5-10 minutes. I understand that. But it's an overreaction to say we're not going to allow any of that to happen because we just can't take a chance with it. We have to give people the opportunity to learn and to grow in that way. And again, with the testimonies, the prayers, we really know what's going on with people in their lives. Because again, we have this almost tradition in the American church where we put on this mask that everything's great and we're doing fine. And so we just assume that things are going pretty well with people. And yet when you start having individual conversations with people, and if they're honest, you know that that isn't always the case. Most of the time it's not the case. People are dealing with problems because we live in a fallen world and we are fallen human beings. And so problems are going to creep up routinely. And it's best that we know what's going on with people so we know how to pray, that we know how to empathize, that we become in touch with what's going on in the body. And so those are things that I think we need to add back into the worship service. We need to make it more engaging for everybody involved. And I mentioned too about just having kids and teenagers in the worship service. Now I know there's disagreement with that, and I understand that, but if kids, young people don't get experiences with interacting with adults who are not their parents or grandparents, they're going to struggle relating to adults as they get older. And I experienced that in campus ministry. There were some students that just didn't know how to really interact with adults that they didn't grow up with, basically. And so that's another thing that because if the kids are part of the body, the teens are part of the body, and oftentimes we just separate them out and give them their own community in a sense, and they're not part of the broader community. And I understand it, but I think it's a mistake, particularly if it's kind of absolute. If they're always in the kids' classes, the youth group worship service. I don't think it's wrong to do that occasionally, but I think if that's the practice, then the kids don't get the experience that they should, and we as adults don't get the experience of having them around. And I just think that's part of being the body of Christ, because they're all part, and we shouldn't just regulate certain age groups to, well, you got to go over here because you'll be a disturbance, or we think you won't get anything out of it, and so we won't have you here. So really, to sum up, it's just the worship service is not doing what it needs to do. It's not, we've relied on it to be our main discipleship time. And I've talked about that it just doesn't work very well. But I believe if we begin to transition to some other things, allowing more time for engagement with each other through discussing the sermon, through testimonies, through prayer, that this will help in discipleship. It still will not be the sole thing we need to rely on. There's got to be more to discipleship than this sitting and being in one space for an hour and a half. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be small groups. It's got to be one-on-ones. It's got to be out in the community, learning the skills of what it means to follow Jesus, learning those things that he did that we need to do that don't come naturally, but we can learn them. And so I don't think it still is not the thing that we need to rely upon totally, but we can change it in such a way that it really facilitates more discipleship than it is right now. So I'm going to leave it there. And again, it's just been a pleasure to talk about these things, and hopefully it's challenged your thinking a little bit. I'm not asking you to agree with everything, but I do want you to think about it. My goal is, mainly with Views from Downstream, is to get people to step back and look at things with a different kind of viewpoint than they normally do, in order to see that there might be some things that need to be changed. A lot of times we just get stuck in the way we do things, and we're just comfortable with it, and we just don't consider that there might be a different and better way to do things. And so I'm just wanting to put these before you. You can do with them what you want, but I hope that these many videos will lead to some change of thinking and action as we live out life in the body of Christ. So have a great day, and we'll see you next week, and we'll talk about something else.